I'm walking you through today a journey from your blind spots to breakthroughs, overcoming some of those fears that we just talked about, those fears that we don't even recognize might be holding us back. So let's dive in. I want you to imagine, remember when you were 8 years old, who was your superhero? Maybe it was a parent or a sibling, or perhaps even a Saturday morning cartoon. What traits did that superhero embody? Now, what stops you from being that very superhero today? From leaping over those tallest buildings, from climbing the highest mountains? My guess is that it has something to do with fear. Now, here's the great news. In the next 50 minutes, it is my goal to take you from this human mindset full of fear to a superhuman, superhero, which of course, we all know if you're superhuman, you have to have superhuman powers. How do we do that? Don't worry. The reality is each and every one of us has the power to take back control over our fears. It's just most of us don't do it. So today, that's our mission. Now, like every good superhero journey, the origin story is usually a little painful. So unfortunately, that's where we have to begin. We have to begin with our origin story. And that is tough because all of us are stuck with lousy brains. I don't mean to offend you, but you and I have pretty bad brains because they're not built for this world. Our brains are built for this one. It's a world where we lived with about 150 or so other individuals. Well, our ancestors did. And in that environment, it was dangerous and scarce, and we lived like that for 200,000 years, right up until this started happening in the last 200. We had this explosion in technology and populations, and you look around, suddenly we're digitally connected to 8 billion other individuals. That's a lot. That's an amazing feat to have exponentially increased all of this technology, and now every single one of us is operating in a global community. There's just one small problem with that. Biology operates on a much different time frame. So biology doesn't have this exponential increase. Our brains haven't kept up. Unfortunately, our brains are stuck way back here. So we have Stone Age brains trying to operate in this modern environment, which means there's a few mismatches. In fact, this Stone Age brain simply can't process the amount of information that is being thrown at us every single day. Information that's coming at a rate of about 400 billion bits per second. Unfortunately, our conscious brain simply can't do that. It can only process about 2,000 bits per second. Which means that, let's see, if you want to do the math with me, it's early morning, 99.999999999% of the time, we're operating from these subconscious instincts, stories, shortcuts, things that kept us alive for 200,000 plus years, really important stories. But today are likely holding us back, preventing us from actually fully living. So let's explore those. I want to ask you a question. So be ready to answer in the chat here. Joni's going to help me monitor that. So I want to know what you're afraid of. In fact, a survey was done about 2 years ago asking people, what's your number one fear? What do you guys think it was? Go ahead and put your answers in the chat.
Okay, we have fears of dying, of spiders, letting people down, fear of speaking, fear of failure coming up a lot.
Yeah.
Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of missing out, rejection, change, not being good enough.
Oh my gosh. These
Fear
are
of death, fear of judgment, yes, absolutely. Fear of not reaching goals, fear of the unknown.
Oh my gosh, these are really good answers, guys. These are absolutely conscious, cognitive, thoughtful responses. I really appreciate that. But now I'm going to challenge each and every one of you because none of them are right. Don't feel bad. Nobody gets this right. It's okay. Are you ready for what the actual response was? It's snakes. Snakes? Seriously? Snakes. That's our number one fear. That doesn't make any sense, right? It's completely illogical. You're not wandering around through the parking lot stepping on snakes. And yet, it begins to make a little more sense when we remember that we're stuck with Stone Age brains. And for our ancestors wandering around the savannah trying not to die, that was something they absolutely should be terrified of. Now, if we are conscious, cognitive, thinking beings, which I like to think we all are, and certainly you gave me some good conscious cognitive responses, I'm gonna add one more thing to that list. One that I didn't hear. Are you ready? Try not to scream in terror. The new Krispy Kreme double down extra fries and a shake? No, nobody's afraid of this. Why not? What's the number one thing that we die of? Heart disease, number one killer. That should look like the laser beam of an AK-47 pointed directly at our hearts. And yet, if you're anything like me, you're like wiping away the drool a little bit. You're like, oh God, that looks really good. What's for lunch? Can I get some of that? Forget the kale. Kale doesn't taste like that. It should, if our brains were built for this world. But our brains aren't. They're built for a world where we couldn't get enough fats and sugars to survive. So our brain still craves that. It says, yes, I gotta layer down the fat because I got a cold, harsh winter here to survive. Oh wait, thermostat. So our brains simply aren't built for this world. They're certainly not built for the modern workplace. Think about in ancestral times, right? You're out working, you're picking some berries maybe, right? Lovely day, picking some berries, and you hear or see in your periphery a little movement to the side, a little something shaking in the bushes behind you. What should you immediately do? I mean, I hope at least turn and look, right? If not, just get out of Dodge. So luckily, in the modern environment, right, we don't have any peripheral distractions or pings or dings or, oh, right. And our brain is constantly going, snake, it's a snake, it's a snake, it might be a snake, you gotta turn, you gotta look, it could be a tiger. Answer that email immediately, gotta look at that. It's not a snake, right? It's Kathy. We like Kathy. She's just checking on us, sending us a text, an email, walking up to our desk. But our brains don't know that, which means our brains fall to fear first, flooding us with cortisol. And the number one thing that stress hormone cortisol does is it shuts down the thinking portion of our brain, this frontal lobe, which means we're even more reliant on those shortcut stories and instincts. Unfortunately, we don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. And our training, it's all about fear. Now, there's good news. And the good news is that our brains are super trainable. We know this because imagine the first time. Remember the first time you drove your car? First time. You're sitting behind the wheel and your hands are at 10 and 2 and you're looking at the speedometer and the pedestrians and oh my gosh, the street signs and the stoplights and the gas pedal and oh my gosh, there's so much to pay attention to. And now today, if you drive, one hand on the wheel, you're talking on your cell phone, adjusting your podcast, and yelling at the kids in the back. This is amazing because what that means is that you've trained your subconscious to drive for you. If you can train your subconscious brain to drive, to do that complex task, we can certainly train it to override stories, instincts, shortcuts that don't help us anymore. All right, so let's dive in to those real fears. I mean, we talked about snakes. I don't think we need to deal with snakes, but I promise I will actually help you get over your fear of snakes later on in the presentation. But then there's the fear of rejection. Many of you came up with scenarios around rejection, not feeling like you're enough, not feeling like you're worthy, not feeling like people are going to accept you. That's a really deep-seated human fear. Why? Oh, pretty simple. Because, well, if you got rejected, if you got kicked out of the tribe back in the day of our ancestors, you died. So really important that we're not rejected today. There's another fear that came up a lot, that fear of failure. And once again, this is a meaningful fear for our ancestors. Because if you didn't hunt well, if you weren't able to bring home the bacon, literally, you once again died. Today, though, this shortcut between discomfort, failure, and death is much different than it was back in the day. So let's start dealing with some of these very human fears. We'll start with the fear of rejection. Now, I know as leaders, we have been told this 1,000 times, right? We have to be willing to exercise discomfort. Well, what does that even mean? Get out of your comfort zone. That's where the growth occurs. Yeah, okay, we've heard that, but what does that mean at a biological level, at a brain level? Well, it turns out that our brain lives in two very distinct, very discrete environments. Here, where we like to be, it's safe and everything is going exactly as it always does. And our brain loves this space. Or we dip our pinky toe into discomfort and our brain leaps from here to, we're gonna die. Wait a second, no, we know that life doesn't really take place in these two buckets, right? Where everything is perfectly going well or there's imminent death. Most of life takes place in this gray area, but we've never trained our brains to exist in this gray area. It's why we have stress responses to really menial things, like asking for a discount. Try this. The next time you go and you get a cup of coffee from whatever your coffee shop is, just order your order like normal and then walk up to your barista and say, yeah, can I get 10% off that order? If you think it sounds easy, give it a try. I promise you, you're going to have a little bit of a stress response. Your heart is going to start beating really fast. Your mouth is going to get a little dry. You might start sweating. Why? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? I mean, you might get 10% off your coffee. Sweet. Worst thing that happens is your barista looks at you and says, no. You get rejected? Oh my gosh, that's death. No, it's not. You pay your $10.99 or whatever you pay for coffee and you walk out the door. Nothing bad happens. In fact, your brain starts to record that and say, had a stress response and nothing bad happened. Didn't die today. Great. Now you go out and you seek more safe forms of discomfort. Like grab a book of poetry, stand on a street corner and just read from your book of poems, nice and loud. People are going to start pulling their kids to the opposite side of the sidewalk. You're going to get some strange looks and it's going to feel very uncomfortable. And once again, you're going to have this fight, flight, freeze response, the stress response. And once again, you're not going to die. And your brain records that again, saying, stress response, not associated with death. The more we actively seek discomfort, safe forms, the more when discomfort finds us and we're not actively seeking it, we can say, yeah, I know what this is. Remember all those other times that we did those things and we had those stress responses and they didn't serve us? We didn't need that because we didn't die? We're okay. Now we can start to override our stress response. We can say, hey, we can stay here in this frontal lobe and make conscious decisions, cognitive decisions. That's most of our life. We're living in this stressed state. So we have to be able to train our brains to operate better in that gray area. You'd never show up to the starting line of an ultra marathon having never trained for it. And yet you're asking your brain to do really uncomfortable things all the time. Like this, right? Tell the person next to you one great quality. Most of us can do that pretty easily. But as leaders, that's not where things end. We typically have to engage in this second conversation of tell the same person something they need to work on. It's really uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for us. It's uncomfortable for them. We have to start training our brains to notice that this isn't death. It's just telling somebody, oh, you have something in your teeth? Oh, good, okay. Thanks, grateful for that. This is the most important training I think that leaders can have. In fact, it's the same kind of training that we give to Navy SEALs because it is so important. I think we can't waste any time. I actually believe we should start this training right here and now. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to join me in a 10-second dance party. Yes, I know it sounds absolutely ridiculous. It is. And you're not going to die. Here's what everybody's going to do. They're going to like kind of maybe groove. They're looking around like, oh, is anybody going to see me? Oh, no, 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 no. I need you to like jam out. Give me your very best for 10 seconds. We're going to do it together. We're going to stop. All right? Are you ready? The whole point is to hear this little voice, this subconscious fear pop up to say, your hips don't move like that. And for you to say, watch me. All right, here we go. 10 seconds. Let's boogie. Stop. I really hope you all were dancing in your offices. And I really hope that if you look around, you're seeing some smiles. Because that's exactly what happens. When we exercise discomfort, we recognize it's actually, one, not going to kill us. And two, people actually respect us a little bit more for it. Because here's the thing, if I called one of you out, let's see, John, just you, okay? I'm gonna put you on your microphone here. Don't worry, I'm not actually gonna do it, John, don't worry, all right? But I'm gonna put you on the microphone and I'm gonna tell John, would you please sing for us the Star-Spangled Banner, soprano, lots of vibrato. Let's just say John does it. And John, I'm really sorry, you are terrible. You're really bad. How do we all feel about John? I'm seeing positive, courageous, brave. So bravo, John. Even if you're terrible. What if John is good? How do we feel about him? Impressed? Okay, again, positive emotions. So what stops us? Oh, yeah, that fear of being rejected. John, listen, if you get kicked out of the tribe, you just have to find a better tribe. That's all. So here's my challenge to each and every one of you. I've got a checklist here for the next month. Go check those boxes. If you find something on that checklist that looks like absolutely terrifying to you, and you're like, well, I can do all of these, but I don't want to do that one, that's the one you need to do. The more we can actively engage in these forms of discomfort, the more we can start to override that stress response, that fear of rejection. So that was easy. Little dance party. We're over our fear of rejection. So let's tackle the next one, the fear of failure. I heard that a lot in the beginning. So fear of failure. Since we just conquered our fear of rejection, I feel much more confident in sharing this with you. That's me as an 8-year-old girl, knowing full well exactly who she was and what she wanted to be when she grew up. I loved the theater. I loved it. I wanted to be on stage. I knew it from that age, but I grew up in a really small town. And so there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity. Where I found opportunity was in 4-H. I could give, public talks. And so I did. I competed in the city competition. And y'all, I won. Now, look, this is not a big feat because there was like 2 other contestants. I'm from a really small city, but I felt good, right? I was like, all right, I'm winning this. And now I get to go to county. And people are starting to notice. They're like, hey, you know what? She's pretty good at this. And I get to county and I win. Amazing. I'm feeling great. Now people are really talking. They're like, hey, Beck, you're really good at this. Hey, you're really valuable in this public speaking space. And I'm like, yes, thank you. I am. I'm going to states. And suddenly it hits me. Oh my gosh, my role, my identity, my value is tied to this thing that I do. I'm really good at this. So what happens if in states I don't win? What happens to my value? What happens to my worth? What happens to, oh my gosh, I got so scared. You can guess what happened in states. I didn't fail. I just never showed up. I actually played sick the day of the competition because I was so scared. I was so scared of losing my value, of losing my worth, of losing my success. Then I never went all in. I know that each and every one of you has a story that's similar to that. There is some point in your life when you allowed that fear of failure to prevent you from going all in, from truly pursuing your dreams. And the real heartache of all of this is it's usually stories that are told out of love that bind us to that failure. Like this, you're really good at that. Nobody was telling me I'm bad or I'm gonna fail. They're saying, hey, you're really good at that. And what do our brains do with that information? They say, Man, don't screw that up. If that's what you're valued for, better not mess up. Or stories like this, like everybody likes you. Everyone likes you. And our brains say, well, yeah, if they knew the real me, they'd see the imposter that is. Why do our brains do this? Our brains do this because our brains are full of ants. Yeah, those squirmy things, not the actual insect. This acronym, ANTS, automatic negative thoughts. Ants are what kept our ancestors alive for 200,000 years. Because if you didn't have that ant to say, hey, you better look, that could be a tiger behind you, you became tiger meat. But automatic negative thoughts, as well as they served us in the past, today prevent us often from seeing the reality. Unfortunately, you don't even have to believe in a story in order to act from within it. So you don't even have to believe that you're not very good or that you're going to fail in order to take action that doesn't serve you. Here's the example I want to give for this. So I'm going to tell you a story here. I'm going to tell you that this square A and this square B, they're the same color. And you're likely looking at that going, Beck, do you need some glasses? Because they certainly don't look the same, do they? But I promise you, I'm not going to lie to you today. They are the same color. And now we can see that, right? You can see that this color gray is identical to this one. So we know a truth. This is an objective truth. The same way I knew, hey, I'm good at this. And the same way people know, or you know, that you're actually an expert in certain things. You are good at certain things. So hold on to that truth. Hold on to that truth. Hold on to it. Uh-oh, did you lose it? Can you no longer see that these are the same color gray? That's okay, it's all right, we'll give it to you again. All right, so you're valuable beyond your role. You're valuable beyond that identity. Your identity is separate from that role. You know those truths. Hold on to that truth. Hold on to it. Did you lose it again? This is what our brain does because our brain wants to keep us safe first. And our brain does this amazing calculus the same way it's doing it here. Our brain knows that this is a three-dimensional cylinder, and that three-dimensional cylinder is casting a shadow here. So obviously this square B must be lighter. Our brain is doing that calculus for us. And it's doing that same calculus to identify truths for us that may or may not in this modern environment actually be serving us. When we lock on to any particular truth, we lock out anything that contradicts it. And so our brain's truth that it's locked onto is we have to survive. Survival is paramount, and we're going to die if we take too many risks. So we actually filter out and miss opportunities. To demonstrate that, I want to play a quick clip for you, and I'm just going to ask you to pay close attention.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
That's right, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
Anybody notice the 21 changes that just occurred? Don't feel bad. You're going to see the exact same thing from a slightly different perspective.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
Yeah, so it's easy to miss things that we're not looking for. And our brains aren't looking for anything positive. They're not looking for opportunities. They're not looking for the breakthrough. They're looking specifically to keep our blind spots hidden. Here's how that ends up hurting us. Here's what I'd like for you to do together. Let's do this exercise. I want to ask you to write down on a piece of paper 3 failures. They can be massive failures. They can be things that you have massive regrets over, or they can simply be spilling milk this morning. Take a moment and just jot down 3 quick failures. For the second bit, I want to ask you to write down 3 learnings. What was the wisdom that you gained as a result of that failure? Think through each failure. What did you learn as a result? Now, I know I'm not giving you a whole lot of time to do this. You can continue this exercise after. But my ask of you is this. What I want you to do is separate your failures from your learnings, and then make a choice. What is it that you want to get rid of? You can get rid of your failures, you can get rid of your learnings, or you can get rid of both. Alternatively, you could keep both. Make the decision right now. Are you going to get rid of your learnings, your failures, both, or will you keep both? When I do this exercise, what I have found is no one ever gets rid of both their failures or their learnings. No one ever just gets rid of their wisdom. People make one of 2 choices. Either they take their failures and their learnings together. They keep them closely associated so that they can refer back and say, oh, I made that mistake before. Here, let's not do that again. Or they get rid of their failures entirely and they just take that wisdom forward. I don't think either one is a poor choice. What I do think is a poor choice is what we actually normally do here. What our brain does naturally is it locks on to the failure. And that's the thing that we carry forward. The reason for this is because we value the win. We value the success. We don't want the failure because we don't value learning. We have no value for learning because our brains are set up such that if you fail, you die. There's no room for growth. There's no room for learning. To override this, we have to start actively chasing failure. Now, I tried very hard to practice what I preach because I know it's easy to say, just go do these things, but it's really hard to actually live them. So I had an opportunity this past year to drive a race car. Now, I know nothing about racing, like nothing. I'm like, there's a wheel, there's some pedals. I think you just go as fast as you can. You drive in a circle, something like that. Nothing about it. So when my partner, who is a huge race fanatic and has been driving for 20 years, said, hey, let's go take this little weekend course. I said, yeah, this is a great opportunity for me to practice what I preach. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to fail and it'll be fine. It'll be fun. I have an opportunity to fail here. All right, so let me give you a little heads up of how this weekend went. So this is me driving. This is me in the car here. My husband is in front of me and the instructor is here. What I want to point out is that it is 11:52 in the morning, right? Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good at this point. We've done a few runs and I'm starting to gain some confidence. And I'm like, you know what? This actually isn't so hard. I don't have to fail at this. As a matter of fact, I think I could pass my husband. I'm gonna do it. So I get to this corner and I gun it and I'm going, here I go. And if I keep playing this clip, you'll hear some cussing and some screams of frustration, so I'll just zip by it. The whole point was that I spent most of my day, it is now 11:59, with this view. And after that particular spin out, I was so angry. and so frustrated that I got out of that car like a little petulant child, and I'm stripping out of my race uniform, and I'm taking my helmet off, and I'm leaning up against the fence, and I am crying those hot tears of anger, right? Just so fully frustrated in this moment that I am failing, and I set out to fail. Why am I so angry that I'm failing? I think it's because of this first time fears. We as adults are constantly engaging in first time things, and our brain doesn't know how to handle that. When we were kids, 100%, everything was a first time thing, and we looked around at our peers, and our peers were all engaged in the same first time events. We were riding bicycles and we were falling off, and then we looked over and our friend was doing the exact same thing. But as adults, what happens? When we go to compare ourselves, we're looking at like 15-year-olds that are making $1 million on TikTok every year and going, how? We somehow make this switch as adults that we should just know. We just shouldn't fail. We should just show up and be the expert because, man, I've had X number of years of life. I should know how to do this now. And this is a big problem because we get frustrated with ourselves because we're not just comparing ourselves to our peers, 150 or so peers that we used to be comparing ourselves to. We're comparing to 8 billion globally connected individuals. And so there's always going to be somebody who's smarter, faster, stronger. If we're in competition with them, we have a problem. So I am literally sitting there at the fence post, leaning up, just crying these hot tears, and an instructor walks up beside me. And he leans against the fence post with me. He says, you know, Beck, there's 2 types of drivers. He says, there's drivers like your husband, and he's pretty good, but he's never going to be great. Not until he spins that car out. And I was like, tell me more, because I'm competing against him. I need to know this. He's like, until he pushes that car fast enough so he knows the exact breaking point, he'll never be that fast. He's like, that's the first type of driver. And then there's drivers like you. And I said, yeah, tell me about drivers like me. How amazing are we? And he says, well, drivers like you, they usually quit. And he walked off. And I was like, oh no, And I'm putting my helmet back on. I'm pulling my pants back on. I get out there, and I'd love to tell you this is the Cinderella story, and I blew past him. I didn't. I spun out another 6 times. But something changed. The thing that changed was the story that I was telling myself. I wasn't there to compete against him. That was the story I'd had because I showed up saying, all right, what am I going to attempt if I know I'm not going to fail? Right? This is the supposed motivational talk that we give people, like, go out there, attempt, even if you know you can't fail. I think that's backwards. Instead, we have to go out and say, what am I going to attempt? Knowing full well I'm going to fail. And it's still going to be worth it. That's the shift. Because now I'm valuing something more than success, or however I define success. To me, the success was I became a much better driver by the end of the day. I wasn't beating my husband, but I was beating my former self. The learning is what's worth it. And that is so hard for us because we are all experts. You're here on this call because you are a leader, because you have become an expert that people look to for answers. And what's so particularly difficult about that position is that the best leaders say, I'm not the expert. And that is hard because our brain really wants us to be valued for our knowledge. My favorite story of the non-expert is of Cliff Young. Cliff was a 61-year-old farmer when he showed up to arguably the most difficult ultramarathon of all time, from Sydney to Melbourne, Australia. It's a 500-mile long race. Now, Cliff had never run even a 5K before. He chased his sheep around his farm and he's like, I don't know, I think I can do it. So he shows up at the starting line and all of the elite runners are lined up with him and the starting gun goes off. The elite runners take off. And here's Cliff just kind of jogging along. So he shocked the world when 5 days, 15 hours, and 4 minutes later, he crossed the finish line. A full 2 hours ahead of the first of the elite runners. How did he do it? People usually say, oh, he cheated, he grabbed an Uber, well, his mindset was different, for sure. He also showed up as the non-expert. See, all of the elite runners had elite trainers, and all of the elite trainers knew how to win the race. They knew you have to run for 18 hours a day and sleep for 6. Well, Cliff didn't know that, so he just ran for 5 days, 15 hours, and 4 minutes. Sometimes a willingness to be the non-expert, to show up without all the information, allows us to gain perspective, to redefine what success looks like in a sport, in a meeting, in a company, in the world. When we embrace the non-expertise that allows us to say, I don't have to succeed in this, I need to succeed here. What we're saying is, look, I don't have to be right. I don't have to be right. That I'm okay not being right. I'm here to get it right. So for me, I rely on this acronym because it is so hard to trust in our fear of failing being okay. Just trust that it's okay that I don't have to be right. I just need to get it right. I need to rely and lean on my team to show up to get it right. So I rely on this acronym called WAIT. Why am I talking? As a speaker, I have to ask myself this question a lot. Why am I talking? Maybe the best thing to do here is to just shut up for a second. Listen, lean in. Alternatively, if I am talking, I still have to ask myself, why am I talking? Am I talking because I'm right and I have a point to drive home and I need to drive that point home? Or am I talking to get it right? To ask questions, to be curious, to draw information out, even if it means that my successes seems lower because it's not my point. But ultimately, that's how we win. That, when we start to value the learning, the getting it right over the being right, now we've shifted into valuing the wisdom over the approval, over the need to be right, over the need to be good, over these ancient fears that are continually pulling us back. All right, so we've conquered rejection, we've conquered failure. I promised you I would get to snakes, and it is actually a fairly relevant thing to be afraid of. Let's talk about how our stories, how the stories that we tell ourselves influence not only just us, but the way we interact with others and snakes for that matter. See, our brain is really, really powerful. So we have to be careful about the stories that we're telling. Hands down, my favorite research of all time is this one. A group of housekeepers split into 2 separate conditions, all right? One group is told nothing. The other group is simply told, hey, do you know that when you're cleaning, you're actually meeting the Surgeon General's requirement for exercise? That's it. It's the only difference between the 2 groups. They all wear these nifty-difty wristwatches which track their exertion level, their heart rate, their steps, all of that factored out of the analysis. And yet, after 4 weeks' time, there's a massive difference between the 2 groups. The group that was simply told that they were meeting the Surgeon General's requirement for exercise had lower weight, lower blood pressure, lower body fat, lower waist to hip ratio, and a lower body mass index. I read that study and I was like, you are an athlete. Thank you for not laughing. I'm also a bit of a skeptic. And I was like, mindset, right? No, there's no way. There's no way. The scientists missed something. So I dig into this research and I find more research that supports this. And I find more research that supports this. And ultimately, I have to come to the conclusion that we are a bit too dismissive of the placebo effect. Well, that's just the story that your brain is telling. Yeah, and that story is incredibly powerful. Incidentally, it's one of the reasons that we are in the middle of a pharmaceutical crisis in this country. In order for a drug to be passed to the next level of testing, it has to meet 90% efficacy. That's good. You want your pharmaceuticals to work, right? The problem is that placebos typically come in, We're at about 80% efficacy. That's not a whole lot of difference between a biologically active substance and what your brain believes is a biologically active substance. Think about the stories that you are telling about yourself and how they are manifesting in yourself, how they're manifesting in your relationship with others. And then think about the stories you're telling about others. How is that affecting your relationship? How is that affecting your business? I think we all deserve to be telling better stories. And one of the simplest, most overlooked tools to get there is listening to yourself. Sometimes people call this meditation. I'm a big meditation fan, but it took me a while to get there because I was locked into the story of failure, right? I would try. You guys have probably all tried this at one point. And what happens? You close your eyes, you clear your head, and here come all the stories. You can't clear your head. I thought, I'm failing, I'm done. I can't do this. Let me reframe this for you. If you're hearing those stories, that's meditation. You're doing it. This is why we measure anything in business. Is we need to look and see, is that story helping me or is it hurting? Do I need to get rid of it? Probably. Because 70% of these stories are negative. They're not helping us. They're not driving us towards new definitions of success. So take a moment, even if it's a minute, and listen in to the stories that you're telling. Get rid of those that aren't serving you. That is meditation. That's the practice. If you're like me, they come back again and again and again, but you start to develop a wall. And you can start to change the stories. Because we know from the power of habit, we can't just get rid of something. We can't just smush those ants, those automatic negative thoughts. We have to replace them with something. You can't just quit smoking. You have to start chewing gum. So what do we do once we smush an ant? Once we recognize, oh, that story isn't serving me. We have to replace it with something. The thing that we need to replace it with are these cute fuzzies. No, the pets. The practice enlightened thoughts. And just like real pets in real life, they take work. They take effort. They're not like ants that just swarm in automatically. These require work and practice. So here's how we can start to smush ants and replace them with practice enlightened thoughts. Let's start with the failure fear, right? I'm a failure. That's an automatic negative thought that comes up for all of us. What do we need to replace it with? Simple. I'm not ready yet. I haven't been driving for 20 years of my life. I'm not ready yet. Here's how I'm going to get better. Here's how I can prepare myself for next time. How about this one? Here's rejection, right? I'll never be worthy. I'll never be enough. This one really hurts me because so many of us feel this and so few of us actually ask this question. For whom? Who am I trying to be valuable, worthy, enough for? As a parent, a spouse, a child? What if I was enough already? What if first I accepted myself as enough? How does that change my internal story? How do I show up differently in those relationships? And then finally, as promised, it's a snake versus it's a snake. I know it's the same words, but here's the magic of your brain. Your brain releases identical chemicals with fear and with excitement. Exact same hormonal signals. The only difference between fear and excitement is the way that your brain interprets it. It's the story that you decide to tell. So public speaking came up as a fear. So let's talk about that, right? I think a lot of us are a little bit nervous about speaking publicly. That's okay. So the next time you have to give a public talk, and your heart starts doing this, and you start to sweat a little bit, and your mouth gets a little dry, and you say to yourself, I'm really nervous. I'm nervous. What's gonna happen? You're gonna feed that story. I'm nervous. What if instead you said to yourself, I'm excited. I'm excited. Now, I know, you're not gonna believe that. You know deep down that you're nervous, but that doesn't matter. This is the magic of it. It doesn't matter. Even if you tell yourself, I'm excited, the brain believes the story you tell it. And remember, you don't even have to believe in that story in order to act from within it. I don't even have to believe that I'm excited. I can know deep down that I'm nervous, but I'm going to behave differently because of the story that I'm telling. I'll be a better public speaker the more I tell myself I'm excited. This is the difference between living in a life of an adventure, a climb, versus an ordeal. Adventure, ordeal. The only difference is the way we interpret this right here. So, congratulations, I pronounced you superheroes, but we're not quite done yet. There's a little asterisk there because superheroes themselves, they are actually full of fear as well. They have fears. Their fear is their exposure of their weakness. Like Superman, think about Superman. He flew around all the time trying to avoid kryptonite. It was terrifying to him. So if we can take one step further beyond the superhero mindset, I want to empower each of you to become a fearless leader. Here's what that takes. It requires taking that kryptonite, taking that weakness, and flaunting it. So imagine, let's just say that Superman had said, okay, world, guess what? Kryptonite, it's a problem for me. What does that do? That empowers his whole team, his whole community. Here comes Wonder Woman with her lasso of truth and says, oh, don't worry, Superman, I got your back. Kryptonite doesn't affect me, it's fine. When we're willing to flaunt our kryptonite, it's scary and it's incredibly empowering. That vulnerability changes the game. It's why, incidentally, this guy, Einstein, we remember him as being a mathematical genius. And you know what we don't remember? We don't remember all of the equations. We don't remember all of the things that he accomplished. We remember this photograph. This photograph is the most famous photograph taken of Einstein. Why? He's showing his humanity. He's flaunting his kryptonite. This was at his 70th birthday party. Paparazzi had been snapping pictures all day long and he was sick of it. He was tired, so he went, and we love him for it because we see human. So often as leaders, we feel like we have to be superhuman. We feel like we have to be beyond that. And those mindsets help. But to be a fearless leader means not only embracing that, but also embracing some of our weaknesses. Turns out there's science behind this. It's called the Pratt effect. I like to call it the Jennifer Lawrence effect because if you know Jennifer Lawrence, she's an actress, she's an incredible actress. However, what she's really known for is her gaffes. She says inappropriate things in interviews. She falls on the red carpet. She makes a big scene and oh my gosh, instead of getting up and like brushing it off and pretending like nothing happened or burying that news, she lives it. She owns it. She embraces it. She's like, oh gosh, I'm such a klutz. I can't believe I said that. And we love her for it. When the Pratt effect was first studied, there were two separate conditions. In one condition, an interviewee would come into the interview and answer brilliantly, 90% accurate questions, and then he'd leave. In the second condition, exact same thing, interviewee comes in, answers the questions brilliantly, 90% accuracy, and then just before he leaves, spills a little bit of coffee in his lap. Whoops, awkward, leaves. Guess who got hired every time? Coffee guy. Because he's more likable, he's more trustworthy, and there was more leadership potential. That was the reasoning. More likable, more trustworthy, and more leadership potential. By spilling coffee? Yeah, because we see your weakness. We see your humanity. Weakness is painful for us. It feels like the world throws us lemons. When somebody says, hey, you're not very good at that, it's like, oof, gosh, ow. And when life throws you lemons, what are you supposed to do? Make lemonade. I hate that saying. Don't make lemonade. Nobody's throwing you sugar. They're throwing you lemons. That's okay. Bite the lemon. Embrace that weakness. Because the reality, that weakness, when you bite it, it's not permanent. It's not going to last forever. You have an opportunity to grow from it, right? There's learnings that can be had. It's not pervasive. Everything you do isn't a failure. And it's not personal. Everybody has lemons. And they taste sour to everyone. When we're willing to bite that lemon, to expose and flaunt our weaknesses, everything tastes sweeter after. So I want to ask you, what's your kryptonite? What is it that you as a leader can begin to flaunt so that you can soar over that mountain? I'd love to tell you that I stand here today as a fearless leader. right? I don't. It's a climb. It's a constant battle. It's like working out, right? I've got a big muscle and I stop for a minute. And being a fearless leader, fighting these fears, takes a lot of effort. It's better with a community. And I'd love to tell you that that 8-year-old went on to do exactly what she wanted to do. She went on to be on the stage, and no. Things got a whole lot worse before they got better. In fact, that 8-year-old was so traumatized by this fear of failure. And then what happens? Oh gosh, you hit puberty. Oof. Age 12, and suddenly I'm going, oh my gosh, I have to not fail and fit in. I can't be rejected. That bowl cut wasn't really helping me. I realized suddenly, okay, all right, if I'm gonna fit in, if I'm gonna not be rejected, if I have to be likable, I have to fit certain norms. And so I stopped eating. I stopped eating because I needed to not be rejected. And I ended up in the hospital, really sick. And my family very kindly came and visited every day. And my dad showed up every day as a superhero. He showed up and he sat down and he said, Beck, I don't care if you reject me. I don't care. We're in this fight. I don't care how many times we fail. We'll keep going to different treatment programs. And I didn't get better. Kept getting worse. It wasn't until the day that he showed up as a fearless leader, shouldering a whole ton of kryptonite. And he said, look, Beck, I don't know how to do this. I'm scared. He started crying. He said, I have no idea what it feels like to be a 12-year-old girl who's afraid of food. He empowered me by giving me his kryptonite. And I said, oh, well, I know what that is. And in fact, I think you have it wrong. See, I'm not afraid of food. I'm afraid of failing you. I'm afraid of failing because you all taught me better. Looks aren't everything. I know that. And I'm afraid that if I don't do this, if I fail you, or if I don't fail you, then I don't fit in over here. I get rejected. So many of us are bound in this. If I'm not a good family person, then how do I provide for my family? And how do I work, family, balance? You don't have to be anybody super special to show up as a fearless leader. My dad doesn't have his name on any buildings. But what he did allowed me to empower myself to move forward. And we all have that opportunity with ourselves, our teams, and our families. What I didn't tell you is that my dad was a minister. I know, preacher's kids. We go one way or another. I'll let you guys figure that association out for yourself. But here's the one sermon that I remember. I sat with my back against a pew, and my dad had a water bottle. He opened it up. He started shaking it ferociously. Water's going everywhere. And I was like, whoa, okay, you have my attention. This is cool. And he asked his congregation a very simple question. He asked them, why does the water spill out? Seemed obvious enough to me, yeah? That wasn't the answer. The answer, of course, was that the water spills out because it's water that's inside. What's inside of you? When life shakes you, which inevitably it will, it is. What's spilling out? And I think the answer for all of us is fear. Fear spills out in the form of instincts and stories and shortcuts that we don't mean to have spill out of us. So when it does, the second question is, how does it spill out? Does it spill out chaotically, just getting everyone around us wet? Or can, as your hand shaking, can you use your fear to fill the cup of others? That is what fearless leaders do. I'm not saying be fearless. Let's be very clear that parentheses around the less is really important. Don't jump into the cage of a hungry tiger because you're like, I have no fear. Nah. Actively, consciously sorting those fears, deciding that is actually a life-threatening thing versus that's my fear of being rejected. That is my fear of failure. I don't need that. That's great power. And each and every one of you has that. Imagine the superhero, the fearless leader that you will become as you let go of these ancient fears, as you let go of all of these stories. you'll find so much more.